the Arizona Cardinals, for a while, have been dysfunctional. I think the franchise as a whole, the Cardinals franchise, has 9 playoff appearances since like 1940 something. I mean, it's been remarkable how. I mean, you have to try hard to miss the playoffs at that rate. And even when they've been in the postseason, for the most part, they don't make deep runs except for the Super Bowl run coached by Ken Wisenhunt, who, for whatever reason, was good that year as a head coach.
They are
We've seen him since then.
mostly inept is the way to describe that franchise.
No
mostly.
doubts. No doubts. And article now through Armando Salguero at Outkick, the NFL's most troubled franchise, the Arizona Cardinals. And he's going through how it's not even really close. And when you actually look behind the curtain and know that even moving forward, despite every troubled thing since this offseason, they now have Monty Ossenfort, and they've paired him with Jonathan Gannon, who was hired as the defensive coordinator for Philadelphia. He's now the new head coach that ended in the Super Bowl there, and we know what happened in that matchup. But, Chad, the future doesn't look great. They're tied into the contract for Kyler Murray, and they have an owner with the last name of Bidwell, who that ownership group and that family, and Michael inherited it from his father, is notoriously cheap.
And it's such a nice place to live, and you're surrounded by such money in that region that it seems like an attractive spot, for an NFL franchise to thrive. And because of poor ownership with the Bidwell family, they never really have. It's remarkable. And even when they get the number 1 pick and they draft their franchise quarterback and they think, now's the time, we're going to have the guy, it's even that is rocky with Kyler Murray, with all the offseason stories and everything else. It's a bad franchise, but it's also a franchise that, because they're not moving from Kyler Murray at quarterback, they need to trade that number 3 pick and get more in return, because there is a quarterback-needy team that will be willing to give up a good amount to trade up and get their guy.
Yeah.
So now's the time to trade back for the Cardinals.
Yes, and they have a chance to load up on picks while also facing a claim against the owner, Michael Bidwell, from a former director of personnel, Terry Donahoe, who is pointing to a burner phone that, this is through The Athletic, a spy drama portrait of the Cardinals that includes Bidwell ordering McDonough and then coach Steve Wilkes to use a burner phone to contact Steve Keim, who was the general manager at the time, and he was serving a 5-week suspension because of a DUI. Now, keep in mind, during this, you can't have contact with the organization, so they could actually contact the general manager and know, okay, here's what we want to do with the roster. We're hurt at running back. Which way should we look? All this. The claim is, the allegation is, they used a burner phone and were told they had to do it. Well, that's in direct violation of league rules and policy, and we'll see what comes of this. Steve Keim, by the way, left the team at the end of last year for health reasons. I think it stems from issues he's had in the past, and they've since replaced him with Monty Ossenfort through New England and most recently with the Tennessee Titans.
And you don't break the rules and get burner phones to get the advice of Steve Keim, with all due respect to Steve Keim.
Well, he was the GM, though, at the time.
Yes. But again, he's not the GM that you're breaking rules to try to get the advice from. When Sean Payton is suspended, you want to get a burner phone and get advice from Sean Payton on the team years ago. I'm just saying Steve Keim is not the most talented of GMs in the National Football League, that I've got to get his sage wisdom on every roster move made during that suspension.
Bidwell hired him, and he's telling others that he's hired to go to the general manager, who I love.
Well, and this goes back to our initial point. Yeah. It's an inept franchise that hires people who aren't great and then circumvents the rules when that person gets suspended to get advice from that person who's not great and not the type of person that you want to go around the rules with to get their advice.
Well, they are in a great spot, though, and they have a chance to load up on the future of their organization by trading out of the 3rd overall pick, and that's really where the draft starts, based on the consensus of those believing that C.J. Stroud's going number 1 to Carolina, followed by Bryce Young to Houston. After that, it's take your best defensive player available or trade out of the 3rd pick if you're Arizona and allow another team to move ahead of Indianapolis to draft the quarterback. That could be Richardson or Levis with the 3rd overall pick, or it could be C.J. Stroud or Bryce Young. I mean, we should also mention them in this. But you know why Carolina wanted number 1. They trade with Chicago. They have their pick. They know they're going to get their guy.
You would think they knew it then, but if not, they knew we definitely want one of these 2 guys, and they'll figure it out after they get it.
Arizona should not trade this selection until draft night. You can work out the parameters of what it might be, and there are teams that are calling them, discussing what it would take to get up to number 3. I mean, if you just go by what the 49ers did when they traded up with Miami to the 3rd overall pick to get Trey Lance, they swapped first-round picks, and they gave up the following year's first-round pick to go get Trey Lance, who was not at the top of the board for the quarterbacks in that draft. But in here, I don't know why you would trade up if you're a team going after Richardson or any of the other quarterbacks, because you're not guaranteed to get that guy, just based on who knows what Carolina and Houston do. You have to be ready for every scenario. And then if your player that you're in love with is there at 3, you trade up. Or if you have C.J. Stroud or Bryce Young who is available because they were passed over, well, then the price tag goes up. So Arizona controls as much of this offseason and draft capital as what Green Bay's trying to do by trading Aaron Rodgers, although it doesn't seem like they're going to get a first-round pick. For a team trading up in the draft with multiple bidders, this is where Arizona can actually start, an actual path towards a winning organization, a consistent organization. They need to get this right, and they need to hold out on trading the pick until draft night.
It feels weird to say that acquiring the best defensive player in the draft, let's say the Cardinals draft Will Anderson, they stay put at number 3. It feels weird to say that doing that feels like a loss for the Cardinals. But to me it does, because the best outcome is them trading away on draft night out of that spot and getting more in return than just the best available defensive player in the draft. And if they end up with that, fine. I'm just saying, of the 2 options, I think the other one's better, to trade out, get more in return, instead of staying put and drafting Will Anderson or whoever that may be. And I think Will Anderson's a terrific player.
Yep.
You're not a loser if you go get the best pass rusher in the draft or your best defensive option in that spot. But of the 2 options, I'd rather trade out of that spot and get more in return.
And I know some of the scenarios have Indy moving up 1 spot from pick 4 to pick 3. But, again, wait until the draft, because you have multiple teams trying to move up ahead of them, and that forces the price tag to go up. Would you draft? Where would you need to be to pull off a trade to move up for Richardson? Because if you're trying to move up from the bottom end of the first round, well, you're going to give up more than just one future first-round pick. There'll be multiple selections. Maybe it's just one future first round. It'll be multiple selections. In some cases, we've seen Justin Fields, he required 2 first-round picks from the future to then apply to the trade to get that deal done for Chicago. Richardson, someone asked me, is he this year's version of Malik Willis? And the answer is no, because last year at this time, we're discussing all these different first-round quarterbacks and where they would go and where they would be slotted. With Richardson, we know he's going to be drafted in the first round. The ceiling is so high with him. Meanwhile, Malik Willis and Matt Corral and Desmond Ridder, everyone passed on them until the 3rd round. That's not happening this year with Richardson or with Levis, who are both going to be first-round picks.
So to your first point, I think 11 is about the marker. I think where the Titans pick at 11.
11 to 15, somewhere in there.
It's not going much past that. In terms of trading up to number 3, with the range where they could do it, you don't want to go too much deeper. I think it'd be too much to give up. And the Cardinals, I don't know they'd want to go that deep into the first round.
Right.
Also, Malik Willis is 6 feet tall,
6'1". Yeah.
It's just not the same. I mean, I think Anthony Richardson is very inconsistent. I have a lot of questions about him being a good NFL quarterback. I'm not in love with him as a franchise guy, but I mean, we are talking just dudes from different planets in terms of athleticism. Anthony Richardson is enormous. He's a better runner. He's got a cannon for an arm. I mean, it's just a different level of athleticism. Not that Malik Willis isn't a good athlete, but no, there's no comparison to me between Richardson and Malik Willis, looking last year's draft to this year's draft.
And just something to consider, if you're Arizona, you can trade back one spot and still get Anderson if the Colts are moving up to get a quarterback. So you can get multiple picks, maybe not a first rounder, who knows. And then you also get the Colts pick this year, which is 4, and you don't lose out on the best defensive player, and you gain picks moving forward, albeit maybe it's not the steep price that you'd be charging if there were a team coming up from 15 to 3.